Yahweh, hey, Yahweh, hey, Yahweh. Thank you.
And now, what we're going to do, we're just going to dialogue. We're going to talk about issues that we have in the valley with Native issues and Native things going on. And we're just random dialogues for someone to talk about. And as I said, I'll be looking here, so if you have a question or an issue, because if you don't understand Native people, you can't deal with them. And by your lack of understanding, you're going to insult them, slight them, and not want them to get involved just from your oversights. It's very, very important. I mean, California is the state with the biggest Native population. It's the smallest enrollment in a lot of the educational activities and a lot of, and part of it's because they feel like they're not accepted, they're not addressed in the ways they want to be addressed. And I don't know if Marie, if you want to start out with some of that, or Ori?
I'm originally from the North Fork Rancheria, and I'm from a federally recognized tribe. And I really enjoy working in Indian territory. So it was just really a pleasure for me to, I did a little phone employment interview, and so I obtained a position with the Northern Cheyenne tribe. So I packed up my stuff and I headed to Montana. And it just was really comforting to be welcomed by relatives over there and friends over there, and to provide a service over in Montana. And in Indian country, it's kind of like that. You kind of have the differences with different tribes and then linkages. And sometimes, our tribes are, at odds with each other, and sometimes they're not so at odds with each other. Where I'm at now, there's a big difference between the Crow Reservation and the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. But here in California, there are different Mono people, or we call ourselves Monachi, but in our native language we just call ourselves Mono, or we call ourselves Wapawetunu. It means people who live where the cedar trees start to grow. And there's different rancherias in this area that are Mono, so that means we have a similar culture and language, and that's with the North Fork Rancheria, Cold Springs Tribe, Big Sandy Rancheria, and Table Mountain Rancheria. But the federal government recognized us as separate tribes, so we have separate sovereign entity for each of those identified tribes. Whereas when I'm at the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, they have tribal districts. They have Bernie District and Muddy District and Busby District, Lake Deer District, and Ashland District. They're about 20 miles apart, and it's like the Mono territory, about 20 miles apart, but they're federally recognized in California. That's why there's so many different tribes in California compared to some other states.
There's 119 tribes in California recognized, and there's like 40 unrecognized tribes. Out of the 119 tribes, there are 64 casinos in California. Oh wait, Jim Chance's 60. So they're always, there's always that, a tribe you'll say, well, how do you get recognized? Because you'll have people that think, okay, that we just got together and we're going to like form our own tribe, and that's why we're unrecognized. But actually what it is, they're recognized as being unrecognized because they were terminated by the government that said, you're no longer a tribe. So what they have to do, they have to comply with everything they want, and they got one shot. That's why a lot of them don't turn it in for recognition, because they got one shot to apply for recognition, and if there's something wrong with it, they can't reapply. So that's the hard thing about it.
Yeah, what Marie said about the government terminating them, most people aren't aware of this either. For years in this country, it was illegal to practice Indian religion. You got put in prison for it. And for instance, my background is Cherokee. I'm a quarter Cherokee, Salagese, how you say it, Cherokee. And in my tribal background, the people think, well, is it evil? Is it wicked? Why can't they practice religion? The Cherokee's national anthem is Saving Grace. It's basically the same as like Catholic religion, but very similar. So you're not looking at a religion that was somehow bad, very good. I mean, you're looking at very spiritual people. You're very, very devoted to practicing good good religion. And yet the natives for years were put in prison to practice their religion. In many schools, if they spoke their language, native language, they got in trouble for it.
Also, just so you know, because you're in this area, there was a great lake called Tulare Lake. Do you know about this? And if you look on YouTube, there was a news segment. Tulare Lake was 30 feet wide, 30 feet, well, it was 30 feet wide, the lake, and I don't know, but it was a shallow lake that the people would go to, and there was lots of animals, and everything was great, and a lot of places now would be underwater if that lake was still there, but to make a long story short, when the farmers came in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they dammed it all up. And I say that was a vortex, and I say that's why a lot of people in this area of Fresno are depressed. They don't do it because that energy's not there anymore. So and that's when the first governor of California, or one of the first governors, Burnett was his name, he ordered the scalping of Native Americans and upped it. It was used to be $1 to $5 depending, to $25 a head. And in this area, the population went in 2 years from 20,000 to only 2,000 in 2 years because they all were killed by the selling of the scalp. And that's why we don't like to be called the Redskins, because it's not about the color of our beautiful coppery skin. It's because that's what they referred to the scalp when there was like blood on it, with red skin. And so to have a team named the Redskins, that's insulting and hurtful. Not only in that name, but in the mascot wearing imitation eagle feathers that we are very prone to honoring. And you only can earn them. Someone can't just give them to you. You earn those things. And they could be taken away from you too if you're not doing well.
Yeah, we were talking about Indian names. The other name was very, very hurtful, squaw, because squaw came, correct me ladies if I'm wrong, this is a story I heard, when General Custer was raping the Indian women, the tribes they dominated, they would actually take a part of their female part out and put it on their head, and that's where the squaw word came from.
And it also means in Algonquin, that was the name for the female genitalia.
Yes, yes.
So when the guys would say, well, she's a squaw, they were really calling her what was adequate, what is it, equal to calling her the C word or the P word, you know, like, you know, and that's why it's so, you know, little kids would laugh when they would hear that word because it was, it's the name of the female genitalia.
And we were talking about the park up in Albury, which used to be named Squaw Leap, with a wonderful story behind it about a woman that went up on the mountain that they called Squaw Leap. She jumped off and jumped to her death because of a bad romance. Lovely story behind it. But of course, the native people didn't want that term used. So what did they rename the park? Anybody know what they renamed the park up there? Or tell me. What did they call Squaw Leap? We will all forget it because we don't like it. River Gorge.
River Gorge.
And so they took it right away from the native people. What was that name that came up with when we were talking last night? What was the name we were going to call it?
I was,
Woman leaping mountain or something like that?
the Mono elders from Big Sandy told me another story. They said that the cavalry went in there, and rather, they would rape the women and either murder them. So rather than be raped or murdered, they would leap to their death. So to add insult to injury, the government named it Squaw Leap. Two things, squaw and then to remember. And nobody, no non-Indian, but those Monos, they knew what the history was. They knew why it was called that, but they never talked about it. And so to me, it's like to add insult to injury. And that's all over the United States. That they have memorials and names that are still hurtful. There's a bell that rings at 6 o'clock in Gardnerville, Nevada. It rings at 6 o'clock every night. The Indians, the Washoe Indians, are trying to get rid of that bell because it meant that there was 4 tribes right there in that area. When it was 6 o'clock, those natives had to be out of town or they get put in jail. So this lady, this woman, her name is Crystal Gray Owl, she was trying to, you know, to get it silenced because she said when she was a little girl, they were at the store and they'd hear the bell and the grandma, hurry, look, we gotta go now. And this feeling, so even up when she's an adult now, she feels that when that bell rings. And so she's trying to send the people, oh, we like it, it reminds us it's dinner time, you know. And I said, you know, well, at least have a memorial to let them know why it rings. And in the meantime, I go, every time you hear that bell ring, you just say, you know, I'm still here, I ain't going nowhere. You know, ring that bell. And there's things like that, like Squaw Leap, that, and a lot of other things. Millerton, like you could, all over.
Milton Lake, how many of you been to Milton Lake? You know where the old courthouse is? See the old courthouse up there in the back? Has anyone seen it? Go look at the old courthouse, you'll see a big pole sticking out of the side. A big beam. They said every day, she said they had their rituals. We call them rituals. They would hang a person there. And they'd use it for target practice. Yeah, it's Indian person. Right underneath where Milton Lake is, used to be a village there. There used to be a place of healing. There's a hot spring underneath there. And they used to have gatherings there. People from all over would come over there. There's another story about 3 rocks too, right? And then I learned this. I came to Fresno in '82. And ever since I've been here, I've got to know the Hmong people and the elders. And they told me a lot of stories of events that happened here. And at first I thought, okay. But then after that, I started seeing things. I seen that courthouse. I seen the beam. I went down to Milton Lake, especially right now, you can go over to Milton Lake, but you have to go in the back. They don't allow you to go back there. But we used to have a gathering, a men's gathering back there, and we used to be able to go back there. And you can see the hot springs boiling back there, bubbling. It's a natural spring. We used to heal people. You had sickness, colds, flus, whatever you had. We had, well, most people had healing people that could actually heal a person. Where the pin cushion is, the big round thing by Table Mountain Casino. How many of you been to the casino?
Like a little wall.
Yeah, you see that little round thing on top? There's a cross on top of it now. Well, this elder I know that passed away, one of her relatives was so strong in healing people, he can make that mountain open up. He used to be able to go in there and get the medicine out and bring it back and heal the people. And I was told this by a true elder. She's passed on now. She's been gone for a while. But I always remember these stories because she taught me some of these stories to pass on to people so they understand. But bottom Milton Lake is Fort Miller. How many of you heard of Fort Miller? That's the fort that used to do the slaughtering of Indians. And I can prove it to you all. Go up towards Table Mountain, take Bryan Road, and you go up that hill, that grade that goes up like that. They started to build another community up there, small new houses. But if you look at the hills are usually sloped like this, right? But if you look, once you pass that creek right there, if you look off to your left, southward, or if you're coming the other way, look southward, you'll see all these little piles of dirt. The hill will go like this, but you'll see a pile of dirt, like a grave. And you'll see them for miles. And those are the Indians, because they used to take an Indian, take pot shots at them, or like she said, they used to mutilate the women in different areas. They put them on their saddles. There's pictures. If you go look in the archives, you see pictures of them in the saddles. You see them hanging right there beside their saddles. They didn't take ears. Not only took the scalp, they took the ears, parts of the women, different parts of women's stuff. And you see those hills where they used to massacre the Indians every day. There's hundreds of them. There's hundreds of them. They try to build that community up there, these new houses up there, and so far nobody's moved in there. My theory is that the spirits are still in there.
If you went on the hill, you could actually see the knobs of the graves. If you looked, you could look, they're still there.
And they're on both sides of the hill. They're not just on one, it's just that one side of the hill. It's like 2 or 3 hills. You'll see them all just green. They're all just bumps. You'll see them. How many of you actually see the grave? You know, these little hills.
And I've never ever, I wondered why the elders never wanted to go to Millerton Lake. They're always like, no, we stay away. I'm not going to stop. Just don't like it.
It was a place of massacre.
Yeah, they wouldn't swim in the water, and they wouldn't go into the hill.
Even the fort, the original fort, the office of the fort is still floating around. I believe somebody has it in the museum. It used to be at Roding Park a long time ago, a little log cabin building, and they moved it somewhere else. But that's a reminder to a lot of Native people here in the city. It's sad. But you go drive by there and see those hills. And they have to face that every day when you drive by.
And it would do you good to just do some of California's history on Native people, because nobody knows it. And that's one of our problems that we have, is that the total disregard that we have in history. You know, even everyone has their own holidays. You got Cesar Chavez, you got Martin Luther King. Not to take anything away from that, but where's our holiday? Not just that Indians celebrate, but that everybody celebrates. That the banks and the post offices are closed. We don't have that, you know. We don't even have our own TV network. Nothing. And like I was telling them earlier, I said a couple months back I was watching 2020. Was it Diane Sawyer? She was interviewing an Aryan brother from Arizona, and he was telling her that everybody needs to go unless you're white. And she goes, "What about the plaque over there at Ellis Island that says 'Give us your poor'?" And he says, "Gone." And what about the African Americans that didn't come here on their own accord? Gone. And I was waiting for her to say, "What about the indigenous people that that were here?" But she never even mentioned that. We didn't even mention that someone was here first, you know? And that's hurtful to our children too, who don't feel like they gotta connect. But you can tell us how it helps our kids when they do connect.
Yeah, well, I think, that in Indian country, nationwide, that what we're facing today is a part of that colonialization through oppression. And so that's where there's different sicknesses and different disruption in family and different other things that take place on a psychological and oppressed basis because our religions were suppressed. And so many people weren't allowed access to the freedom of religion. And so what's happened is it reflects on what's happened is it kind of turns people against each other. And so, and that may be a result of some things that have happened in this community where people are looking at not really feeling really healthy and at each other. And so taking, like things where there could be $1 million coming in a day to devastating a whole constructive way or enterprise because that built-in colonialization that resulted in oppression where we fight amongst each other. And it's from not feeling our self-worth, from not being able to express our religious freedom. And where I work at the St. Labray Catholic Indian Schools, the Northern Cheyenne tribe sued the Catholic schools for a settlement. And the Catholic schools just said, yeah, we'll give you $30 million for a settlement for utilizing our children's images and whatever. And but what happened is the federal government took away the rights for Native people to practice their religions. So that affected like the Northern Cheyenne, it affected the Crow, it affected the Mono, it affected California Indian tribes, it affected the Cherokee. But since then there has been changes. So currently with the Catholic Church, they've been very supportive of Native American religion and culture. The priest presides at some of the Native religions. The Native American Church is very strong. Sundance, sweats, cloth ceremonies. It's an integral part of religion now at some level, but some places it was all taken away, and it's people still practiced it, but they practiced it underground, and they kept it going. And so you couldn't really share that information with your non-Indian neighbor. You had to practice it. So you went ahead and you practiced your ways, but when you went to public school, you never told the person that, oh, you're going to go have a ceremony tonight or something. You just had to be able to fit in, and that's where it came about of having to live in two worlds, trying to adjust to the dominant culture and living in Native American culture. And some people can do it really well, and some people they can't adjust, and it's really psychologically, spiritually, emotionally trying on different Native people to have to try to fit into two worlds and survive in a capitalist society, and to try to function in not in a communal society, but looking at a more individualism, and the individualism kind of takes away from our unity and our family and our collectivism. It was that at one time, if there was somebody in the tribe that didn't agree, then we didn't do it, we did something else. It was a collective. And so those things have been changing a lot. So, and our children are kind of like trying to find their place, where they fit, and how they can still have their tradition and their culture and their ways and language, which is really important, and a part of their identity. And sometimes, you know, it's they get taken away by other thoughts. And our children from the previous generation, my mother, for instance, was in a boarding school when she was 4, and North Fork, they had a Presbyterian boarding school. My father went to a Sherman Indian Institute in high school, but the religion was very strong about taking away language and culture. And so the boys sat on one side, the girls sat on the other side. They couldn't speak their native language. They were punished if they didn't get to speak their native language. So it inhibited that flow of culture and language and identity from one generation to the next. And there's been so much trauma in that previous generation that they've been so traumatized when they talk about their different experiences. They're just overwhelmed with emotion, and it inhibited them to pass on different things to their children. And it might be like, maybe second generation Japanese, that sometimes their parents may not teach Japanese to their children, so they end up being English speakers and not bilingual speakers. So different things like that have gone on for our children. But when I was in this area and I was the director, I just felt it was so important to give children their heritage and their culture. And that gave them the ability to know who they are and give them their self-esteem. So I worked with little dance groups, and the drum is such good medicine. And helped, and the families, they all got involved with helping to dress their children out. And I had a daughter, and she passed away, but she danced when she was 3 years old. And her daddy was Northern Cheyenne, and he was a traditional Northern dancer. So I dressed her out in all kinds of different, she had a Northern traditional dance outfit with her fan, and she came out at Stanford Powwow, and she had a jingle dress outfit, she had all kinds of shawls, and as she grew, I kept all her outfits. So when I started working with little children, I had all these outfits. So I started dressing them up in some of her outfits. Then I got mothers involved and grandmothers involved and started making outfits for boys. So we had brass dancers, and we just had so we had a dance group, and then we had a drum. And the children just really enjoyed the drum. When they heard the drum, they would just be little infants. They've never been introduced to the powwow, and they just start moving their feet even as they're sitting there. It's something about the heartbeat of the drum. It affects the heartbeat, and they just feel like dancing. And it's a part of their genetics, and so it was really good medicine, and it improved their grades. It improved their identity and their socialization, and it did just wonders to help them to get through school. And I was just focusing on K through 12, trying to get them through school and graduate.
Yeah, and as Lori says,
Yeah,
just the whole focus of bringing the native traditions in seems to increase their ability to do well in school, because it's a different community mindset. As Lori was talking about the capitalist society, Sioux Nation actually has a word for the capitalists. They call it wasichu, which is not color of skin, it's the thought pattern. And everything that's white, as we call it technically, is wasichu, and it's meaning not Indian, not the way Indians think. They're a very collective society. So if you counsel and teaching Indian students, you need to embrace and understand their traditions. It's very, very important to them. And actually, if I could share, all three of those have great examples of how children supported by tradition, how far they got in life. And as Lori said, unfortunately, her daughter passed on a short amount of time ago to show the collective nature. Ori and I decided to bring her from Montana for this conference. And as soon as all the people here found out she was coming in, they put together in a big hurry a wonderful job memorial this evening for her daughter. I mean, how often do you get a whole community to do that today? And after we leave here, going to Memorial up in Mulberry, and that whole community's going to be off of her. That's the whole idea of nature, and nature of an Indian community. And Marie, you can talk in a minute about your granddaughter. I wish we could show you the picture she has. And Victor has a son. Tell us what your son's doing right now.
So, my son's only 17. This was supposed to be his last year in high school. But last year he took a test for the Air Force. And now he's going to Reed College. He didn't have to go. This is supposed to be his last year in high school. So he took that test and he got all his grades and everything. So now he's in college. He just turned 18 last week.
Yeah.
And he learned how to fly airplanes. He already knows how to turn out a jet engine and put it back together. I don't know when you watched Channel 47 last month, it was on Channel 47. There was only 6 throughout California, this area, that made it, and there's 9 throughout California. He's really, really, really good.
Oh, Victor, I think that's so wonderful because you've been like a single father for him, and you've always been there for, I remember when he was just little, and now that he's 17 and he's going on.
18.
18?
Last week.
Oh, gosh, makes me feel really good.
But you see, Indian people can achieve a great amount. And they're when they're focused, they're motivated, they'll stay there if you give them right support.
And I just want to add that ceremony is very, very important to our people. It's always been very important. So as they get older, sometimes you forget it. And one thing about our people, they'll stop doing everything so that they can be clean to participate. But I always want to say, when you, as a people, when you know where you're at and you know where the sacred sites are, you know the history of that land, and you know where your people are buried, and no one else does, and then you see it kind of, people, what's that word, when they disrespect it, when they're, not, that's really hurtful. So if you remember, I always tell this story, do you remember the Twin Towers, right? The ones that got the planes crashed into? And then maybe a year later, whatever, they were going to build a mosque. Do you remember? I don't know if they ever did or not. But these people were mad. This is a sacred site. How dare you build a mosque? It's just across the street. These are supposedly the people that hurt us. And I thought to myself, now they get it. Now they get what we've been through this whole time. But they didn't get it, for us. But for them, they were upset. So this is what Indian people has been, especially if you look at different little memorials, especially South Dakota's Black Hills, where they have the president's faces on them. Nobody has the right to deface nature. I don't care who you are or what you did. Nobody has the right to deface nature and put some images on there. And not only was that the Black Hills with their images that have no right to put on the, that was a sacred site for those Lakota and Nakota people. That was their prayers. They had a connection. They had a relationship with that land. And so the government comes and carves 4 white men's picture. Now they got Geronimo there supposedly to make it all better, But to me, that's very hurtful to that tribe that they did that. And they do it all over. And it's not so much that, but we never got our day. We never got our day to say, this is why we don't like the Redskin name. This is why we don't like the Black Hills image, that it's not an honor. This is why when you name your football teams and your, under tribes' names, it's not an honor.
And we always look ahead too. Chief Seattle is one of the people that says 7th generation. When Native people are planning, doing things right now, we are planning to make sure the world is good for 7 generations out. And how many people think about that anymore?
And those are generational blessings. I'm going to do good by my great-great-granddaughter. I'm going to do this for them. And society, government, they don't do that. They don't care about their own kids. They're burning down the rainforest. They're doing all kinds. They don't care. It's all about money. And in our culture, it's always about your character. That's what always was, you were rich by your character. I think Ori told me this story about when Cortez came, he asked those tribes in Mexico or Central America, show me where your richest tribes are. Where are they? And see, they had streets paved of gold, so they were looking for gold and stuff. Well, they took them to the wisest men. They took them to the most sacred, holy men, and they killed all those Indians because they said, these aren't the richest people. They were looking for material things. But in the Indian way, it was always about your character. You know, you carried yourself well. I don't
I was gonna say that part about Geronimo. Geronimo, he was actually the chief. A lot of people got the assumption he was the chief. I say this on behalf of the Geronimo family. He was just a simple man. And they made him out to be some type of chief. He was a man that was concerned about his people. All he wanted to do was feed his people, keep his children fed. What I mean by children is because when a person not only feeds his children, but he feeds all the children of the tribe. And that's the way most of our people work, is that we didn't feed just one child, we fed everybody. And that's what his thing was. And that's why he became, they say he's an outlaw. He was just a man searching for food. Yeah, he killed some people. He was wise, but he had visions and they told him what to do, how to do it. And that's why all he wanted to do was just feed his people. Because the cavalry, the U.S. government was so bad. Oh, we'll send you 800 cattle and only 3 cattle show up. How are you going to feed 300 people with only 3 cattle? You know, that's why he couldn't see that. But that was government policy. Well, on paper it said 800, but only 3 showed up. And all the crookedness in the government, the cavalry and the ranchers, they would say, oh, we can take that and sell it for ourselves. And that was like greed.
that was consistent, that was all the time. And I just want to share what I shared with the ladies earlier, and it was about someone, like people that, let's say, they want to have a fried red meat, and they're not Indian, and I wanted to share the story, back in the day, Indians were not allowed to hunt anymore. It was against for them to go out. Then they couldn't, they removed it, which is intentional. Every reserve or every reservation, every colony is way out of town. It's intentional so they don't come into town. They wanted to push it back. So they can't find a job. They don't have transportation and they can't find a job. So the government said, okay, we're gonna supply you with commodities, which was flour, oil, canned meat, some essential stuff. Native people weren't used to eating that stuff. They never, dry milk. One thing my grandmother said one time is that the people never milked a cow before. And I go, why? Why didn't they milk a cow or drink milk? She goes, because we never milked a cow or anything or drank the milk. That would be like telling me to tell you to go milk that dog and let's drink its milk. We never drank milk from an animal. And she said, and that's why, the powdered milk was so unusual. But anyway, so they didn't have anything to eat. So what they would do is make fry bread. They would make fry bread and eat it and it tastes good, even though it was not valued as nutritional at all. But so sometimes when we were up in Auburn, there was a group of women that were non-natives who were just taking off and making Indian tacos. And I'm just saying, sometimes they look down on if you're not native to making it because you don't know the hurt that went into that, why you had to make that fry bread, And then you could tell about the dress,
Oh, yeah. Well, the government gave the Indians a flour. They never had flour before. They made things with acorn paste and everything. And the flour came in, you ever see the old broadcloth, the little flower prints and everything? That's the flour bags it came in. And because they were not letting Indians hunt Indian skins for clothing and everything, the Cherokee traditional regalia or dress, and if you see people dressed out, actually it's Apache too, I think it comes from Apache, is these broomstick skirts or different tiers of this small print. That was the flour bags they made their dresses from.
So if someone wants to replicate it, say I want a Cherokee broom skirt or broomstick, it wasn't right. You didn't know the story. You had to know the story of why it was suffering. It was hard. You had to use what you had to use. So.
And Dr. Amy said we're just about out of time. Do we have time to do one song on the drum kit?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Up the road, Dr. Amy.
Yes.
Ladies?
Yes.
What are we going to sing?
One of the things the drum represents, like they were saying that a lot of our children get used to the drum. The sound of this drum, not of you will feel it, not of you may not, but it's what you hear when you're in your mom's womb. And before you're born, this is the first sound you hear. So those 9 months that you're in, this is what you hear. This is why the drum represents the people. It represents Mother Earth's heartbeat. You want me to drum me, Jerry?
Picture is a big powwow drum, and you see him on a lot of the, he's a big drum, a lot of the powwows is that whole. That's long. I know the, I got some.
You guys should come on. The song comes from Tule River. Like Captain was saying, I travel up and down California all summer long. In fact,